Nietzsche's suspicion of truth did not begin as skepticism. It began as psychology. He did not first ask whether our beliefs were accurate. He asked why we needed them to be true in the first place. What kind of life demands certainty? What kind of person clings to objectivity? What instincts are satisfied by believing that truth stands above interpretation? Nietzsche noticed something unsettling. Humans do not pursue truth neutrally. We pursue it selectively. We value certain truths because they stabilize us, protect us, or grant us authority. Truth in this sense is not discovered so much as preferred. It answers to needs that are rarely acknowledged. This is why Nietzsche distrusted philosophers who claimed to love truth for its own sake. He believed this posture hid a moral commitment, often an ascetic one. The will to truth, he argued, is not self-evidently good. It is a value like any other, with a history, a psychology, and a cost. To insist otherwise is already to smuggle in morality. Nietzsche was especially suspicious of the idea that truth must always be told, pursued, or endured, regardless of consequences. Life, he believed, is not oriented toward truth, but toward preservation, growth, and power. Truth is tolerated, even celebrated, when it serves these ends. When it threatens them, it is resisted, ignored, or reframed. This does not make Nietzsche a relativist or a liar. It makes him a diagnostician. He is not saying that nothing is true. He is saying that our relationship to truth is never innocent. We do not stand outside interpretation. We are embedded in it. For Nietzsche, the question is not what is true, but what does this truth do? Does it strengthen life, or does it weaken it? Does it enable growth, or does it pacify? Does it clarify experience, or does it deny it? Once the death of God removes the guarantee that truth is sacred in itself, this question becomes unavoidable. Truth must now justify itself, not metaphysically, but existentially. Nietzsche's challenge is uncomfortable. What if some illusions are necessary? What if the demand for absolute truth is itself a form of denial? These questions set the stage for his most controversial claim, that illusion is not the enemy of life, but one of its conditions. Nietzsche's next move is even more unsettling. He suggests that what we call truth is not something discovered waiting in the world, but something created, shaped slowly through human needs, agreements, and habits. This claim is often misunderstood as crude relativism. That is not what Nietzsche is doing. Nietzsche does not say that humans simply make things up at will. He argues that concepts arise through a long process of simplification. Reality, as it is lived, is chaotic, fluid, and overwhelming. To survive, human beings impose order. We group similar experiences together, ignore differences, and give these groupings names. Over time, these names harden into concepts, and concepts harden into truths. Nietzsche gives a famous example, the concept of a leaf. No two leaves are identical, yet we treat them as the same. We forget the differences and preserve the category. This forgetting is not a mistake. It is a necessity. Without it, thinking would collapse under detail. Truth, in this sense, begins as useful fiction, a way of managing complexity. What disturbs Nietzsche is not that we do this, but that we forget we are doing it. Once concepts solidify, we begin to treat them as if they correspond perfectly to reality itself. We mistake our tools for mirrors. Language, which was created to serve life, begins to dictate what counts as real. This is why Nietzsche calls truths a mobile army of metaphors. They are metaphors that have been repeated so often they have lost their imaginative force. They feel objective, inevitable, and timeless, not because they are, but because their origins have been forgotten. Nietzsche's point is not that truth is arbitrary. It is constrained by reality, by biology, by survival. But it is never neutral. Every truth reflects a perspective shaped by interests, instincts, and historical conditions. To call something true is already to have selected what matters. This insight undermines the idea that truth stands above human life. Instead, truth emerges within it. It evolves, it serves. and sometimes it dominates its creators by pretending to be independent of them. For Nietzsche, recognizing truth as a human invention is not nihilism, it is honesty. It removes the illusion that our values are guaranteed by the structure of reality itself. What remains is responsibility. If truth is something we make, we must answer for what we make it serve. This recognition prepares the ground for Nietzsche's next claim, one that unsettles even those who accept that truth is constructed. That illusion is not merely unavoidable, but essential to life itself. Nietzsche's argument does not stop at the claim that truth is constructed. He goes further, and this is where many readers recoil. He suggests that illusion is not a flaw in human existence, but one of its conditions. Without illusion, Nietzsche believes, life would be unlivable. This claim only makes sense once we abandon the idea that human beings are designed to know reality as it is. Nietzsche sees life as oriented toward survival, expansion, and expression, not toward detached accuracy. Illusions emerge because they protect, stabilize, and energize us. They allow us to act decisively in a world that is otherwise overwhelming. Nietzsche does not mean comforting lies in the ordinary sense. He means the deep frameworks through which reality becomes meaningful at all. Identities, narratives, values, and goals. These are not discovered facts. They are interpretations that organize chaos into something a human being can inhabit. Consider the belief in a stable self. Nietzsche argues that the idea of a unified I is an illusion, a grammatical habit elevated into metaphysics. Experience is fragmented, contradictory, and in flux. Yet we speak as if a single subject persists unchanged. This illusion is not an error to be corrected. It is what makes responsibility, memory, and action possible. The same is true of moral values. Nietzsche believes moral systems are interpretive frameworks that give human life structure and direction. They simplify reality by dividing it into good and bad, permissible and forbidden. These divisions are not written into the universe. They are imposed, and without them, coordinated social life would collapse. What Nietzsche rejects is not illusion, but unconscious illusion. When people mistake their interpretations for reality itself, illusion becomes tyrannical. It demands obedience, it punishes deviation, it denies its own origins. This is when illusions weaken life rather than strengthen it. Nietzsche's ideal is not a world without illusion, but a world in which illusions are acknowledged, chosen, and shaped. Life requires fictions, but they should be life-enhancing fictions, not ones that deny strength, creativity, or becoming. This is why Nietzsche admired art. Art openly declares itself as illusion. It does not pretend to be objective truth. And precisely because of that honesty, it can carry truths that logic cannot. Art shows how illusion can deepen life rather than distort it. The danger Nietzsche saw in modern culture was not that it relied on illusions, but that it denied doing so. It claimed objectivity while smuggling in values. It demanded truth while secretly fearing its consequences. Illusion is not the opposite of truth. For Nietzsche, it is one of the conditions under which life remains possible. Nietzsche's account of truth and illusion leads directly to one of his most distinctive ideas, perspectivism. This concept is often flattened into the claim that everything is subjective. Nietzsche meant something far more demanding and far less comforting than that. Perspectivism begins with a simple observation. There is no view from nowhere. Every act of knowing occurs from a position, biological, psychological, historical, and cultural. Our senses filter reality. Our language shapes it. Our interests select what matters. To pretend otherwise is not objectivity, but self-deception. This does not mean that all perspectives are equal. Nietzsche explicitly rejects that conclusion. Some perspectives are shallow, reactive, and defensive. Others are expansive, disciplined, and capable of holding contradiction. Perspectivism is not relativism. It is a ranking of viewpoints based on strength, breadth, and honesty. Nietzsche believed that traditional philosophy tried to escape perspective by appealing to absolutes: God, reason, pure objectivity, or universal morality. These moves promised certainty, but at the cost of denying the conditions under which knowing actually occurs. Perspectivism exposes this denial. It insists that knowledge always bears the mark of the knower. What makes perspectivism unsettling is that it removes the possibility of final arbitration. There is no ultimate authority that can declare one perspective eternally correct. Instead, perspectives compete. They prove themselves by what they can endure, explain, and create. A perspective that collapses when challenged is weak. One that can incorporate rival views without disintegrating is strong. Nietzsche admired this kind of strength. He believed great thinkers were those who could see from many angles without dissolving into confusion. The goal was not neutrality, but multiplicity under control, the capacity to hold tension without retreating into dogma. Perspectivism also explains Nietzsche's hostility toward moral certainty. Moral systems that present themselves as universally binding often do so by erasing their perspective. They declare their values to be objective facts. Perspectivism unmasks this move as an assertion of power disguised as truth. Importantly, perspectivism does not abolish truth. It reframes it. Truth becomes something achieved through struggle, interpretation, and refinement rather than something handed down from above. It is provisional, contextual, and hard-won. Nietzsche's challenge is not to abandon truth, but to take responsibility for perspective, to know where one stands, why one stands there, and what one's standpoint costs. This idea reshapes everything that follows in Nietzsche's philosophy: morality, knowledge, power, and selfhood. Once truth is understood as perspectival, the question is no longer whether a belief is absolutely true, but whether it is strong enough to sustain life without lying about it. Nietzsche's perspectivism leads him into a confrontation with one of modernity's most sacred ideals: scientific objectivity. He did not deny the effectiveness of science. He denied its innocence. Science, like every other form of knowledge, operates from a perspective, and that perspective reflects particular values, instincts, and power relations. Nietzsche noticed that science presents itself as value-free while quietly presupposing a very strong value, that truth is worth pursuing at all costs. This devotion to truth did not emerge from science itself. It was inherited from morality and religion. The scientific will to truth is, in Nietzsche's view, a moral commitment masquerading as neutrality. Objectivity, Nietzsche argued, is not the absence of perspective, but the disciplining of multiple perspectives. A scientist does not escape interpretation. They train themselves to see in a particular way, to suppress certain instincts and privilege others. This discipline produces extraordinary results, but it does not lift science above interpretation. It refines a specific one. The danger arises when science forgets this, when it claims to describe reality as it truly is, rather than as it appears under certain constraints. It overreaches. Facts begin to carry moral authority. Data becomes destiny. What can be measured starts to dictate what matters. Nietzsche was not anti-science. He admired its rigor and honesty, but he feared its expansion into domains it could not govern. Science can tell us how bodies function, how systems behave, how patterns repeat. It cannot tell us why those facts should guide our values, our purposes, or our ideals. When science assumes that role, Nietzsche believed it becomes another metaphysics, one that denies its own foundations. It replaces God with mechanism, salvation with prediction, and meaning with efficiency. Power does not disappear in this transition, it simply becomes less visible. This is why Nietzsche links knowledge to power. Every claim to truth organizes the world in a certain way. It elevates some interpretations and marginalizes others. Perspectivism makes this visible. It does not accuse science of corruption. It asks it to be honest about its limits. For Nietzsche, the problem is not that science explains too much. It is that modern culture expects explanation to replace interpretation. In doing so, it mistakes control for understanding and accuracy for meaning. Science remains indispensable, but it is not sovereign. Once it claims sovereignty, it ceases to know what it is doing. Nietzsche's rejection of absolute truth is often misunderstood as a rejection of standards altogether. In fact, it is the opposite. Nietzsche rejects absolute truth because he believes it encourages intellectual laziness disguised as certainty. When truth is treated as fixed, universal, and final, thinking stops. Interpretation becomes obedience. Absolute truth promises safety. It offers a place to stand that does not move. For Nietzsche, this promise is seductive precisely because life itself is unstable. But he believed that philosophies which deny this instability do so at the cost of honesty. They exchange vitality for certainty, growth for reassurance. Nietzsche observed that claims to absolute truth often emerge when a culture is exhausted. Unable to tolerate ambiguity, contradiction, or risk, it demands guarantees. Truth becomes a shelter. Once installed, it justifies obedience, suppresses dissent, and presents itself as morally superior. What appears as certainty is often fear in disguise. This is why Nietzsche treats metaphysics with suspicion. Systems that claim to describe reality as it really is tend to erase perspective entirely. They deny the conditions under which knowing occurs. Nietzsche sees this as a refusal to accept finitude, the fact that human beings know from within life, not from above it. Rejecting absolute truth does not mean embracing chaos. Nietzsche does not want a world where anything goes. He wants a world where truths are earned, not inherited, where claims must prove their worth by what they enable rather than by appeal to authority. This is where Nietzsche's idea of strength reappears. A strong perspective does not need absolutes. It can endure uncertainty. It can revise itself without collapse. It can incorporate contradiction without disintegration. Absolute truth, by contrast, often reveals fragility, the inability to live without guarantees. Nietzsche believed modern culture clung to absolutes even after God's death because it feared responsibility. Without an external authority, humans must answer for what they believe. Absolute truth postpones that reckoning. Perspectivism forces it. For Nietzsche, abandoning absolute truth is not a loss. It is a demand, one that asks whether we can live honestly without metaphysical insurance. After the death of God and the collapse of absolute foundations, Nietzsche does not leave truth in ruins. He redefines it. Truth becomes no longer something guaranteed by metaphysics, but something forged within life itself, provisional, perspectival, and inseparable from value. In this new condition, truth must justify itself. It must show what it does. Does it strengthen life, deepen understanding, expand possibility? Or does it pacify, diminish, and deny? Truth is no longer sacred by default. It is tested by its consequences. This does not mean Nietzsche endorses comforting falsehoods indiscriminately. He despises lies that protect weakness or deny reality. What he defends are life-enhancing interpretations, ways of seeing that acknowledge suffering without collapsing into resentment or denial. Truth, for Nietzsche, must be strong enough to face life without illusion about illusion itself. This is why Nietzsche places such importance on artists, philosophers, and creators. In a world without guaranteed meaning, these figures do not discover truth. They shape it. They offer perspectives capable of organizing chaos into something livable. Their authority does not come from certainty, but from vision. Truth, after God, becomes plural, contested, and dynamic. It lives in tension rather than resolution. This is unsettling, but Nietzsche believes it is also honest. The alternative is not peace, but stagnation. a culture clinging to dead values because it fears the responsibility of creation. Nietzsche's challenge is therefore ethical as much as epistemological. If there is no absolute truth, then we are accountable for what we affirm. We cannot hide behind objectivity or tradition. We must answer for our perspectives and for the kind of life they make possible. This is the burden Nietzsche places on modern humanity. Truth is no longer something we obey, it is something we carry. Whether we are equal to that burden remains an open question.